and neither will you. Anyway, so it was almost like being students again. Can you imagine this now? Totally cut off from everything that had been happening. And more things were happening to the Beatles than were happening to anybody in the music world. It was extraordinary. So there was the acoustic guitars, and we just sit around playing and singing just for us and other friends in the ashram. It was really like being students again. No fame, no crazy tours, no screaming fans. And I, at that time, Ringo has reminded me recently, I played acoustic guitar from when I woke up in the morning until I went to bed at night. If I put it down, it was only for lunch or to drink some liquid. And one day, I was going through all of the parts that I go through when I'm playing my stuff, and I can't help it, I just do it. And John said, "How do you do that?" I said, "Well, that finger picking." I stopped playing and I took a moment. I said, "Now that you ask me, I'm not so sure myself. I do it second nature now. I've forgotten how I do it." And John said, "Well, you teach me." And I said, "Sure. So do you want to hear what I taught John? Bring me a guitar." So it began. Now I can't teach you it all right in one move here. But I'll tell you one thing. John was a good student. I said, "John, it's a pattern. But when it's moving really fast, you don't know how it's done. When it's moving really fast, it's hard to know how it's done." So I broke it down for John, and it went, I said, "Choose a chord where all the strings are open or some closed, E." And here it goes. Thumb, third finger on top string, thumb on fifth string. Practice that. Sounds easy, right? But it isn't. And it took me 3 days to learn the complete pattern. I learned it from Dirty Hugh in a graveyard long time ago. And when I taught it to John, it took 2 days. He was real fast. Sometimes you get this pattern. You don't know where to put your fingers because this hand is moving. And you've got to learn how to actually position the hand. So this takes 2 days, believe me. The third day, you should have the whole pattern. But John had it down too. But then, what was more interesting to all of us was, what do you do with a picking like that if you're playing in A minor? And in the folk styles that I play, it was fascinating to John to see, and George, and Paul. It was more difficult to teach him the picking because he's a left-handy. So me teaching patterns as the right-hand guitar would be difficult, impossible, really. But John kept saying, "Paul, come and learn this picking, it's really good." Paul said, no, I'm all right, I'm all right. Well, he was all right, because genius visits Paul, as it visits me many times. And he was just walking around listening, and he picked it up and created a very unusual one. which I'll tell you about in a moment. But John got this going. But there is a descending E minor down to G bass, F sharp bass, F bass, from the folk, flamenco, classical world that I'd learned chord structures from. Very, very unusual, and maybe not known by these three songwriters. It comes from Bach. The descending patterns of the A minor chord is very important to the classical blues flamenco world that I came from. And John wanted to learn that, and I said, well, with the picking, it goes like this. He had it down. One day he got it. And there was another in deep meditation. And she had been in there for longer than we were. We were out in the sunshine. And John was concerned about this young woman and said to Maharishi, bring her out now. And Maharishi said, not yet. A healing was going on. So John wrote, dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? Wanna sing, everybody? Dear Prudence, it's a brand new day. The sun is up, the sky is blue. There's nothing wrong to spoil the view. Dear Prudence, won't you come out to play? And she came out, and there she is, sitting right there. I never quite figured out what Paul was doing with his finger picking, but out of that picking came that blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You only wait for this moment to arrive. Blackbird fly into the night. And then this descending stuff that came out of the guitars, it influenced George in a very unusual way. George said, I'm not going to learn the picking, Don. I like the Chet Atkins style. Chet Atkins on his Gretsch, because George had a Gretsch too. And Fred Gretsch is here with all his guitars. Chet Atkins liked to put a guitar pick between the thumb and the first finger and use the other fingers to do the picking. So George continued that, but George was more fascinated by the structures of the chords of this folk, flamenco, classical styles that I kept playing every day. And this style coming to George. I live at the well, and I rode to 6:30. While my guitar gently So there's 3. And so, going on, somebody tells me that Mother Nature's song is about me. All day long he's sitting singing songs for everyone. It must be me. I think it is me. And you know, it wasn't in India. It was a year before. One day, Paul came around to my flat and asked me to help with the children's song. They knew I knew a lot about children's songs. But let me tell you, they're not children's songs. The fantasy songs of legends and myths, they are the property of the whole human race. Legends and myths make our lives heroic. It's only in the Victorian age that legends and myths were designated the world of childhood. Not so. But in India even, most extraordinary, one day John said, "Will you help me write this song? It's like a children's song for my mother." And I realized as he spoke and gave me the first chords and lines that he was writing, that it was a song to his mother Julia about a childhood he never had. And he said, "I don't know how to write those kind of lines." And I realized he did, but all he needed was a bit of help. Maybe I helped. Seagull eyes. I don't know. Sounds like me. But it was very touching when he wrote that song, Julia, with that guitar picking. But only in a matter of weeks, he'd made it a sophisticated stylo zoom. But that day, a year earlier, when Paul arrived at my apartment flat in Maida Vale and knocked on the door one quiet Sunday, the streets outside of the Edgware Road were completely empty on that sunny Sunday afternoon before fame had taken away totally our private life. We were free to move about. The bell on my door rang. I opened it, and there was Paul in his classic suit, no tie, with his guitar strung around his neck. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm writing songs." "What are you doing?" "I'm writing songs too. Can I come in?" And there we sat on the floor, my tatami Japanese floor, with the brass bed in the corner. I was a bit of a mixed up lad, you know, a brass bed on a tatami mat. I had my little Uwer tape recorder rolling, writing songs. Paul sat down. I said, "What have you got?" And he said, "I got this." Only little G, blowing his mind in the dark with a pipe full of clay. What can you say? Paul Matunji. I didn't know who Paul Matunji was. Paul knew, but later we know that would become another song titled Ellen Rigby. And then he said, out of the blue, "I got this other one, and I'm missing a line." So, well, what is it? We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. And so he sang, he said, "You write children's songs. I'm missing a line just here." I said to myself, Paul McCartney, if he fell on the piano, by the time he picked himself up, he would have written 3 songs. Asking me for one line. So, I told you I was 3 years younger, didn't I? So I was still a little bit, my goodness, Paul's asked me to put a line in there. Now I knew that lines had been put in and words had been put in by Ringo and Mal Evans. I knew all this, but a whole 2 lines. So I went off to the bedroom, I said, give me a minute. And I came back. And I came back with this sky of blue and sea of green in a yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine. Come on, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in the yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yeah, yellow submarine. Then Paul said, that'll do. And then the doorbell rang again, and I went to the door, and I opened it, and it was a young British policeman, a bobby, with a policeman's bobby hat on. And Paul came up behind me and leaned over my shoulder, and the bobby looked at Paul and said, oh, it's you, Mr. McCartney. And he stood to attention, and he saluted. And I turned around to Paul and I said, is that how it is? He said, that's how it is done. And the bobby said, is that your car, Mr. McCartney, downstairs, with one wheel on the pavement and the other 3 off? And Paul said, yeah. And the radio playing? Yeah. And the door open? Yeah. And it's an Aston Martin? Yeah. And the bobby looks at Paul and says, if you give me the keys, I'll park it for you. And I went, and up came the bobby with the keys, gave them to Paul, and saluted again. And off he went. And that day, as Paul wandered down to his well-parked Aston Martin, off into the future, that future that would lead us all to here. A couple of weeks later, I went to see the movie, of course, The Yellow Submarine. Everybody in London was invited. There was anybody in London was invited. And when it came to that part in the song, of course I felt great. I'd added a song, line to one Beatle. Yeah. But that song that John began with the guitar picking, that song that was coming out from deep down in John through his meditation, Julia was tender and told of a child holding his mother's hand on a beach. And all those songs that came out of India, many, many songs. I'd also been designing my own songs there. And although history tells a different story, I remember sitting there saying to those 4 guys, when you go back and make your next album, you don't need an album cover. Just have a white sheet. Everybody will know it's yours. So indeed, the early Bohemian influence on the Beatles and I, all around the world, and I have to tell you this is so. We have indeed rediscovered an ancient heritage of a mythic adventure into the inner reality. And one man came from the Himalaya, instructed by his own teacher, to bring to the world a simple, pure form of meditation which had been lost over many years. And this legacy has been carried on and introduced to the whole world. And now it is up to the students to continue this quest to enlighten the whole world. Amen. After I returned from India, I also recorded my own album called The Hurdy-Gurdy Man. And this tells the story of my journey to India, where I met the deep levels within myself. And in this very hotel there is an ashram, and Michelle and Jessica, the daughters of the great family Mark Lapidus, who have created for so many years this great honor and great celebration of Beatles music. The Beatles, the greatest friends this planet ever had. And so, Michelle and Jessica, the daughters of Mark, we thank you. And dear Prudence is there in the ashram to introduce you, leaflets and talks. You too can meditate if you wish. You can learn. The Beatles are hurdy-gurdy man. Maharishi's a hurdy-gurdy man. And I am a hurdy-gurdy man. Born like a star in my vast sleep, I open my eyes to take a peep, to find that I was by the sea, gazing with tranquility. 'Tis then when the hurdy-gurdy man comes singing the songs of love. Then when the hurdy-gurdy man comes singing the song of love. Hurdy-gurdy, 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 he sang. Hurdy-gurdy, 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 he sang. Chant with me. Hurdy-gurdy, 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 he sang. 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 Hurdy-gurdy, 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 he sang.
Donovan! Mr. Donovan Leach! Donovan Leach! Magnificent, my dear friend. Magnificent. Thank you. Thank you.